Welcome, everyone. You're listening to and watching In the Crosshairs with Raquel Okyay, and my special guest today is Alan Chwick. Alan Chwick is the expert of experts. I love this guy. Okay, him and I know each other several years. We go back a little bit. I've interviewed Alan before for a couple of stories in Human Events. And I love this guy. So I want everyone to get their pad and paper and pen and take some notes and pay attention carefully because we're going to get the right information. We're going to get the facts. And this is going to be a great show. So welcome. I'm so glad to have you, Alan.
Well, good afternoon to you as well. I've picked a piece on self-defense, which is really not fully self-defense, but really the aspects of violence and resistance. Now, of course, we're not advocating violence. We have Antifa for that. But we gun owners, we Second Amendment people, do believe in self-defense, of course. And I'd like to start with a little story, which is true. I'm going to brief it up a little bit because it really goes on for many, many years. But it is about the people of Moriari, which goes back a few hundred years ago. They were basically cannibals. And their king, Chief Nunuko, I think it's pronounced, made a demand that the violence had to stop. And this is centuries ago. And they all promised never, ever to fight again. Well, this worked really great until about 1791 when the British showed up on their little island. And these foreigners figured out very, very quickly that these people wouldn't fight. They would not do anything. And these people figured out for themselves, they were called the Moriaris, figured out for themselves that the choice was between enslavement and or possibly even being eaten, because again, they were still cannibalistic from hundreds of years ago.
What part of the world are we talking about?
This is the Chatham Islands off of New Zealand. Okay, this occurred. And the elders sealed their fate. They said, we cannot fight. We will knuckle under. The law of Nanuko was not to be changed. The strategy of survival literally did not exist. We either be enslaved or we get eaten. That's it. Just to bring this story up to date.
That doesn't seem like a good strategy to me.
Well, it's not. And we're going to find that out in a moment, of course, because we're going to tie it into today's self-defense.
Okay.
In 1933, the last Moriari, Tom Solomon, passed away, and they were totally destroyed, these people. They chose nonviolence all the way. A culture, I guess you'd have to call it, of suicide.
Yeah.
We today don't wish to fall into this failed culture. And as Second Amendment critters, and I say that critters in a good way, we accept a different path, hopefully. And why our founders gave us the Second Amendment is exceedingly important to us, just like the First Amendment. Of course, they put the First Amendment first for a simple reason, is that you cannot have a democracy, even though, again, we're a republic, we understand that, without freedom of speech. You have no freedom of speech, you cannot have a republic, and you cannot have a democracy. And they gave us the Second Amendment second, only because that First Amendment is really the first thing that makes us. But the protection of that became number two. So
liberties, Second Amendment is liberty's tooth. I think, I don't know who said that, but there is a quote from one of the founding fathers. And I also believe, Alan, that a lot of this stuff is in their documents, in their research, in the before the Bill of Rights and all of this conversation was going on in our Congress in the beginning of our country, right?
That's right.
And it's implicit, these reasons why self-defense is really a God-given right. And nobody can take away your God-given right.
Well, on that side note, I would recommend everybody read the Federalist Papers, because those are the documents that you're talking about, which were the debates of why we put in amendments, why we want to have a constitution, and so on. You do have to understand that the Bill of Rights was one of the last things added to our Constitution.
Yeah, it was about a year later. And I understand that, and the reason being is that those Bill of Rights were kind of, people pretty much expected that. It wasn't written inside the Constitution exactly, but people pretty much thought that if we're going to have a free country, well, then these things exist anyway. But as the year went by, they realized that they needed to put this in stone. They couldn't just hope that everyone understands the importance of these rights. So yeah, it came about a year later.
And also remember to say that these rights are not given to us by our Constitution. They are enumerated there to state that we have them. They are ours. They are God-given. Everybody wishes to survive. It's innate in us to do so. And these are just the protections to tell the government, keep away from us. These are ours. You cannot touch them. So bringing the islanders up to date, we sit here now at a time where we look at the world, what's going on around us. And of course, a lot of this goes back 45, 50 years ago when the Democrats decided to take over the country, so to speak. We kind of put a kibosh on them by voting in what they consider a crazy man, President Trump. Fire and fury. Okay?
He reminds me. I love Trump because we're the same. Trump and I, he's from Queens County, so am I.
Yes.
And he talks, and to me, it's like my next door neighbor. It could be my relative. It could be because people from Queens, they talk like that.
Yes, they do. They act very
personally. Some of the things he does, I'm not going to be in agreement with, or I'm not, 100%. I'm not like whatever he says, I go with. But just personally, I like the guy because he reminds me of my hometown.
Well, he reminds me also, as a New York escapee, I wasn't too far away from him. My father worked and had a store in New York City, so I was there an awful lot as a kid. So I appreciate him. Again, like you said, can't agree with everything.
No.
But in general, he is what we want, and he is what we needed, desperately needed. So we don't fall into the same category as having a suicidal mentality, because we have been put down as Second Amendment people. I mean, some of the current stories today, a woman just the other day called the police because somebody was wearing a T-shirt that said, what was it? You control your children, I'll control my guns. The T-shirt triggered her and ticked her off.
Yes.
This is an impossibility.
Yeah.
Okay? So we don't want to fall into that crazy, drooling, rogue ridiculousness. So we kind of hired a new guy. We voted him in. Of course, the other side doesn't want to believe that. But we can simply say also that we are a super moral group as conservatives. Of course, there are some conservative Democrats as well. I'm not going to say no. And of course, the illustrious John F. Kennedy, and I don't say that in a negative way, was a fiscally conservative Democrat, which of course a lot of people do not wish to believe anymore. So hopefully now we're going to begin to move in a steadfast way and not look at this nonviolence. I mean, look at all the people that are becoming CCWs, concealed weapon carriers. We won't debate here whether open or concealed carry. That's not what this is about. But more and more people are doing it. More and more blacks are doing it, which is delightful. I've never been opposed to it in the least bit. And I'm pleased to see them coming to their senses and to say, gee, for many, many years, we were restrained from doing this. And that's where gun control really comes in.
That's right.
And the ideology, we're hopefully pushing this back. Now, most people don't realize where this ideology came from to begin with. Did you ever listen to the song Imagine by John Lennon?
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful song to people, but it was never to me, because I figured out real quick it was Saul Alinsky's book put to words. And Saul Alinsky believed in socialism and Marxism. And that's what the Democrats have been doing to us ever since. And if we fall prey to it, well, we end up like the Moriari. We'll have to succumb to it. I'm a fighter, so that's not going to happen. We look at what's happening in England. You can't spray somebody with mace or pepper spray. Knives are being restricted even now. Guns were restricted and knife fights went up, knife killings went up, and now they're going to restrict the knife. What comes after the knife? The baseball bat, the chair, the finger,
Right.
the pencil. So what can you do? I mean, it's just getting really crazy.
Alan, do you think that it's an orchestrated effort by the gun banners to not only put out the misinformation, that, you know, not educating people in the sense that you really have a God-given right to defend yourself, and if that means getting trained and getting a permit and, you know, buying a firearm, you know, go do it. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's this negative connotation with gun owners. It's part of the reason why I started this program, Alan, because I wanted to bring out to the public people like you and I. So we are gun owners.
Yes. I'm a carrier also.
You're not a criminal. We're not beating people up and stuff. No, we want to be safe and we want to protect ourselves, and that's our God-given right. Do you think that the Democrats, or the left Democrats, let's call them, or the gun banners, do you think this is an orchestrated effort to just confiscate guns? And that's something that I think our side have been saying. So we say there's this orchestrated attempt to confiscate our arms because once you confiscate firearms, you really don't have any freedom. You can't defend yourself against anybody, whether it's a criminal or it's a despotic government. I mean, you're a sitting duck, basically.
That's right.
So do you think this is an orchestrated push? They'll deny it. Democrats will be the first one to say, I don't want your guns. I don't want it.
Oh, wait. Actually, they have been saying it lately.
Oh, they're saying it, yes.
Okay, so they're not lying about it. We want your guns.
We want your guns.
Is it orchestrated? Personally, I feel yes. Okay. Personally, I have a theory on it. I'm not a conspiracy crazy kind of a person, but I bring it all together to the New World Order. They can't control us in the New World Order unless we are enslaved, period. Now, that goes as high as possibly Soros. In fact, not even possibly. We know he's a New World Order person. Right. We know it's documented. We can follow the money, how the money's ended up at moveon.org and so on. Yes, this is orchestrated. Even to the tune of ridiculousness. A little boy brings a broken plastic toy gun, which is obviously toy because of its color, brings it to school to show a friend. Now, years and years ago, it would have been the teacher takes it away, puts it in the drawer and says, little Johnny, when you leave, I'll give it back to you. You take it home and please don't bring it tomorrow.
Right.
No, instead the teacher calls the principal, brings in the principal. The principal then calls the police. of course, the news people listen in on the scanner, and they show up and they blow this thing out of proportion intentionally. Just like they blame people for fat shaming, they're gun shaming. This kid becomes so petrified of a gun. The parent becomes so petrified, I'm not going to buy my son a plastic gun.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I say go out and buy your son a Nerf if he's really young. As you know, a little bit of my history, for 22 years, I taught kids how to shoot.
Yeah.
From the age of 5.
Yeah.
Age of 5 to 21.
I want you to tell us a little bit about that experience, because it's really unique, and it's necessary, because especially, you know, if your kid, you know, is responsible enough and you want them to know and learn how to defend themselves at an early age, is awesome. And they become very good at it. They become very good marksmanship, and it's a, you know, it's a sport. It could be a sport, but it's also important for their entire lifetime. And you did that for 20 years.
22 plus years. I was the managing coach of a junior program.
Right.
I can't say that we dwelled on what's that?
Tell me a little bit about what these kids were like. Were they really interested, focused? They wanted to learn how to use a firearm the right way?
The answer to that is yes. And also, we actually had a young lady go to the Olympics in 2000, which we were very proud of. Kids, first of all, who shoot well, do marksman well, also usually have good grades in school. Because the main thing required is concentration.
Yeah.
You stand there with that rifle in your hand or lay there in prone, concentrate. So if you can concentrate, you can do the sport excellently. Everybody can learn to do it safely. Now, we're not talking that we would teach kids defensive moves. We taught them the appreciation of the item, the safety of the item, and how to use it. We did have a 3-year-old in the program at one point. His father came to us and said he sits in front of his safe where the hunting rifles was. I said, well, let's put a BB rifle in his hand. Let's take the magic and bring it home, so to speak. And that worked very well. We've had kids with autistic children.
Okay.
We can focus them down. They can focus on a target beautifully. We had a young man, actually, he was 35, but he had Asperger's syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to shoot very, very well.
Nice.
The goal of the program was to teach, of course, kids safety at different stages. Right. Young kids, do not touch, find a gun, leave, tell a parent. We use the Eddie Eagle program. As kids get older, they're allowed to do certain things. My kids, when they reached a certain age, I would purposely leave a gun out. I'd take the firing pin out so it can't fire. And I told them, if I do something stupid, you come over to me and say, Dad, you left that there. When they got a little older, I said, you come over to me and you give me a kick in the butt and say, Dad, you really did something really dumb. Okay? And because,
I bet they did.
Okay, I'll come back. There we go.
Okay.
Somebody called me on my phone. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So different times in your life, you get more and more responsibility. It's the same thing we do with kids, of course. Gee, how come kids don't run into the garage, pour the gasoline on the floor and light it on fire and burn the house down? Well, we teach them. You taught your kids, don't touch the oven. It's hot. Yeah, one of them went over and did this. Oh, wow. He learned the lesson, or she learned the lesson.
That was a kid.
Okay.
Oh, don't touch it. Oh. Yeah.
So then they learn to listen to you because they knew you were right.
Yeah.
We teach them how to use an electric drill. We teach them how to use a screwdriver. We hand them a knife and a fork at a young age. It may be plastic, but we give it to them.
That's right.
Education always works. And as I said, I did that for 22 plus years until I moved out of New York. Can I give them a plug?
Yes.
It was the Freeport, New York Junior Program in Freeport, New York, www.freeportjuniorclub.org. Greatest program in the Northeast. There's nothing like it in the whole Northeast. It's inexpensive. They supply the ammo, the rifles, the targets, everything. And there's range officers, and everybody is skilled as a instructor. So
that is really great. And you know what? These kids that graduate the program, they get to go out and they get to combat the misinformation. So they're already trained. They already know what is right, what is true. And when their friends kind of say, "What are you doing with the gun? It's scary." And they shoot out the stuff that the left is pressuring them to shoot out. And then their friends are like, "Hold on a second. I've been shooting guns, for a couple of years now. I'm trained. You don't have to be afraid of the gun,
Right.
So they go out and they teach others, which is really awesome too.
Well, the program in Freeport also lets these kids, and providing the other parents agree, they can bring those kids in, because we never did it for the money, even though there was a fee. Once you became a member, it was $75 for the year, really didn't cover too much. And we had great people that did a lot of donations and raising, but they could bring a kid in for the day. And we run them through training. We let them shoot a BB rifle, because you don't put a 22 in everybody's hands. And if they decide to come back a few times later, that's when we say become a member. But they could come back a few times without anything. And if a parent says they'd like to try it, well, we're going to let the parent try it too, and teach them safety. I can say we won over a lot of soccer moms and anti-dads and things like that through the years. The program, when I got there, had about 7 kids. When I left, it was well over 100. And today, I'm out now 2.25 years. I think they've got about 130 members between the ages of 5 and 21.
Very fantastic.
Yes, it is.
So happy.
So,
I wish that, there were more schools around, fitted for children and teenagers and things, so that they, because I think that kids who get involved in any kind of sport, really, as an extracurricular activity, I do think that keeps them away from, maybe some other behavior.
yes, it does.
When I was a kid, I kept myself really busy. I joined every single sport. I was a cheerleader and a volleyball player and a gymnast and my poor parents were like driving me around everywhere, I got a game. But that I was a good student too. But that extracurricular activity filled up that empty space, that empty time, and it builds it up in a productive way. It's the same thing with firearm training for kids. I think it has the same exact effect.
Well, it's like any other training. Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up through the 50s and 60s, and we had rifle teams in schools, and I carried a rifle in the 60s back and forth to school every day. It was never a problem prior to 1968.
We talked about this the other day on the phone, Alan. I want you to talk about your experience in the New York City schools, where we had firing ranges in the basement.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
Every school after World War II that was built and received federal funds was required to put a rifle range or a gun range into the school, and the range did not belong to the school; it belonged to the VA. And the VA would take care of it, and they were allowed to charge the public to use it, and that would pay for the maintenance. Of course, somewhere,
because we had these ranges in the basements of our schools. Were kids shooting up people in the schools in your generation? Me neither.
Nope, never had a problem. In fact, scholastically, which started in New York State somewhere in the late 1800s, about 1890 or so, I think it was. I may be off a little bit. Since then, scholastically, in New York State, I can speak, there has never been a shooting. Yeah, there's an accident, somebody drops a rifle, that happens. But never an intentional pick it up and shoot. No.
Isn't that amazing? And Governor Cuomo, after the Sandy Hook incident, he just rushed off. I think it was just a race to see which governor could pass a gun control law quick enough. by the left, you know, that happened. And meanwhile, the state of New York had not, you know, it's not a problem there. Gun laws are already strict there. And then Cuomo and the Democrats in the state legislature came up with the SAFE Act, which is absolutely violation of the Second Amendment, has so many restrictions. It's not even clear. It's not even defined. A person can walk into an ER in New York State because maybe they're having insomnia. And I know of one particular case where it was insomnia. And he's a veteran. He's living on Long Island. And he goes into the emergency room for insomnia. They give him some medicine. He goes home. He goes to sleep. A week later, the sheriff's office calls. And they're like, yeah, we're going to come and get your guns. And that's under the SAFE Act. And there's no rhyme or reason in the law. So it's basically like, they could just, you know, well, you look like we should take your guns. No, man, I mean, this is unconstitutional because it's special rights for special people. Special right, it's unconstitutional.
Well, also, not to interrupt really, but it kind of is anti-HIPAA because information had to be moved through a system that technically should not have had it, except for the quote-unquote SAFE Act. So,
right.
And there's also no recourse written in law for the appeal of getting the firearms back, which is a mistake. They avoided, not avoided, but voided due process even.
Right.
Okay. In fact, a lot of the laws they're looking now to try to install voids due process also, because they're talking about that, you know, family members. Well, so-and-so is, you know, they call the sheriff and, well, you know, my husband is acting really silly, blah, 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 blah. But the famous one really is during divorce, one spouse, I won't say it's always the woman or the man, I'll avoid that issue. But one of the lawyers are going to ask, does the other one have firearms? The person's going to say yes. And an order of protection gets cut whether there's reason for it or not. And that happens in New York State quite often. And there's no due process. You've done nothing. It's an asset. When the family breaks up for divorce and there's guns, I want my guns. My gun costs $10,000. Here's $10,000 cash out of the account. We're even there. It's only an asset. It's like a toaster.
It's private property. It's private property.
Yes, it is.
They literally can't, I mean, they're literally stealing your private property under the guise of a law that is not even clearly defined.
But New York intentionally writes laws that are vague.
Yeah, right.
So that anything can fit in, and they wait for case law to fix it. I'm not a lawyer, but the famous line is and I can speak about Nassau County Police Department and pistol section, they'll take your guns. And then you try to get them back. And there's really no full procedure. There's some quasi-appeal system. But what everybody eventually does is they file something known as an order to show cause. And because Nassau doesn't want to show up in court and get case law against them, usually your guns are returned within 24 hours of the order to show cause.
That's a good trick.
Yes, it is. Because case law.
To show cause is a motion to the court to hear a matter, to hear an issue.
That's right.
So
That's
the
all.
other person the other person that you're having a dispute with, they have to show up, or they're in default. Right. They have to show up. So what you're saying is Nassau County Police don't want to show up because then it is going to create this case law that's going to work against them.
Now it could also work in their favor, it's possible, but if it works against them, it's now case law. And that means they can't do that anymore.
Right.
I've told people to use that even to try to get their pistol license when Nassau County says, well, it's going to take 1.25 years, but state law says it takes only 6 months. So you wait the 6 months and issue an order to show cause why the pistol license isn't issued. Bingo, 72 hours later, oh, come on down, the license is available to you. It works.
I'm going to tell tell all my friends about that.
I assume it would work in other states too, especially if there's no due process. If there's due process, there's a way to set up and say, okay, we'll apply for the appeal. The appeal, here's the appeal date. You know, you come with a lawyer or not. You have something. Right. Nassau is known to act like New York City. So,
you know, just for the audience, the main two components of due process is notice and hearing.
That is right.
And the idea is that you, because you're innocent until proven guilty, you have a right to be noticed that you're being accused of something, and then you have the right to appear in front of a judge and state your case. So you have a right to defend yourself in a court of law. So the due process is so important. And when our elected officials, the politicians, when they write laws, if they write laws voiding the due process, it's unconstitutional.
That is correct.
Just throw the Constitution in the garbage. If the court system isn't going to use the Constitution, we just might as well throw it in the garbage and call ourselves socialists.
That's right.
Because you know, it really has to stop. None of us want to be in a communist situation. Alan, you might know this, but my dad was born and raised in Cuba, communist Cuba, and my grandfather was the postmaster general under Batista, who was the leader before Castro. Yeah. And when Castro came, and my father is a journalist, when Castro, writing for the newspaper, and when Castro came in with a revolution, with the revolutionary ideas of free speech, free elections, and all kinds of good things, he was lying, because he's a communist. That was never the plan. The plan with communists is to collect all your property.
That's right.
They own everything, and then they can divvy it out as they so choose. That nullifies freedom, right? Because I need to work and do things on make my own decisions, make my own mistakes. I'm gonna make mistakes, but I'm an adult. I don't need somebody else making these decisions. That's exactly what communism is. People have to recognize. So anyway, my dad, when he realized that he was for the revolution, and when he realized that Castro wasn't legit, he started writing in the newspaper against him. Do you want to know what the restitution is for my dad because he was writing against Castro?
He had to either leave or go to prison.
He went right to prison, but they sentenced him to death. They were going to kill him. They were going to kill him for that. And the only reason why my dad got out was because at the time the Catholic Church had considerable power in Cuba. He studied with the Jesuit priests, and they came to bat for him. They were able to negotiate him out of prison with the point that he had to get on a ship and right to New York Harbor, and that's where he came. And he did get political asylum. So I just want people to understand, your school teachers, what the school teachers are teaching your children is that communism is everyone has this, everyone is equal, equally poor, equally under chains. This is not freedom. If you have to decide for yourself. So it's just simply not true. Communism has killed and hurt and destroyed countries. If you look at Cuba right now, 50 plus years after Castro, and his brother's the same thing, who's running it now, Raquel. Look, you know what, Alan? They're living in the 1950s. They don't have cars. They don't have, of course, the resort areas are beautiful. The rich people are there. The beaches are nice. But you go outside of that tourist area and you're going to see poor, very, very poor country. And also the conditions in the hospitals and the schools are very, very atrocious.
Yes.
So we got to wake up to this stuff, that the constitutional republic of which we are, America, is it perfect? No.
But it's the best. the best damn government that there is in the world, even though it's not perfect.
That's right. You know, but, we have to deal with the cards that we've been dealt. And,
That's right.
and I think if we can educate people to really go back and read the Constitution, to really go back and understand the Federalist Papers, and to really go back and understand. And these guys were philosophers. They were theologians. They were educated, sophisticated men who wrote.
Right.
I mean, read it. I read it, and I'm like, wow. You know, they good. It's backwards of it.
Yeah.
And it's really in my opinion, it's very logical, and it's just really about education, and try to take that smoke and mirrors and put it to the side, and try to come to a conclusion yourself.
As far as education is concerned, the first thing we should do is get rid of the Department of Education. They've never educated anybody, and that's where the Democrats were able to take civics out of the schools. They don't teach civics.
Right.
There are some great civics programs out there, and I'm not going to plug anybody, but the kids today don't have the civics. There's no love of nation. There's no love of the flag. It's not there. In fact, most of them think that freedom of speech is abound everywhere. Actually, it's not.
It's not.
Freedom of speech is you against your government. I can say something to you. I can say it. Doesn't mean you're not going to sue me or punch me in the face. Of course, punch me in the face, I've got a civil action. But you can sue me for something I said that's not true, because freedom speech is not necessarily free. Okay? It's free if it's truth. That's the key. So that's where we are.
So Alan, what I want to know is from you, I think we wanted to talk a little bit just about the morality of self-defense, the moral aspect of violence and resistance. That it's morally good. I think was a point.
Well, just getting back to the beginning story, they led themselves into a suicide. Okay, period. The country was destroyed. The island was destroyed.
And that was
they wouldn't fight back.
They
not
didn't
fighting back. Now,
Right.
not everything has to be violent. Okay, fighting back takes place in many different ways. Voting for us is one of those issues. Okay, but if somebody is violent to you, personally, I feel equal force comes back at you, if not greater. If I'm a little guy, which I am, and you're 7'2" and weigh 240 pounds, I like my equalizer. Okay? And if it wasn't improper, I'd pull it out and show you what I carry.
Well, you know what? Next time I come to New York, if I was like in your presence, I'd feel totally safe.
Well, you should be.
Like hang out in the city or something. I want to bring you along.
Well, I'm not in New York anymore. I've escaped. I'm in South Carolina and enjoying life a hell of a lot better in a land that's much, much freer than New York.
You like North Carolina, huh?
South Carolina, South
Carolina.
I'm in the north part of South Carolina in the rural area. I have a beautiful farm across the way from me with cows and everything.
Okay.
It takes 45 minutes for a policeman to get here. So my dogs are my first line of defense. My alarm is the second, and my pistol and shotgun is the third.
You sound like you're all set there too. You also have an FFL license.
Yes, I do. Federal firearms license.
Do you want to plug your business?
Well, if you'll let me, it's everything 22 and more. Out of Greer, South Carolina. You can find us on the internet in that name, everything 22 and more, MORE.com. And we're what you call a non-stocking dealer. We can get everything, but because our overhead is our home, we don't have to abuse you dollar-wise.
That's perfect. So how did the South Carolina people like the New Yorker?
Oh, well, first off, actually, if you put the word gun in the sentence immediately, they will at least back away and say, well, maybe I'll give you a chance. If we have a moment, I'll give you a true story. I bought property and I brought in a builder and we were discussing, and he's talking on the property. And I said to him, well, I'm a New Yorker, and if I say anything New York stupid, put your hand on my shoulder and say, Alan, cut it out. Then he said something that how he owns an AR-15. So I said, well, I have more AR-15s than I can count on my hand, my feet, your hands, and your feet. And his mouth hit the floor. Then he said, well, and he reaches around and pulls his coat aside and says, I carry a SIG. So I went, I carry a big 45. And he says, well, I'm looking at a new gun. I said, I don't need a new gun. I have 37 of them. And he goes, 37 handguns? I go, yeah. Doesn't everybody? I said, it's like dancing. It's like shoes. You need a pair for dancing. You need a pair for going out. You need a pair for cutting the lawn. And no, there's no difference. I need one for Target. I need one for rodent. I need one for varmint. You know.
And that's your prerogative too. Nobody should look. I mean, that's great. I mean, it's your it's your thing. It's your specialty. Nobody should be looking down on you, Alan. Nobody should be looking down on you. You're an educated man. You've done great things in your life in the cause of 2A, and I'm sure much more because you're just a great guy. I said in the beginning of the show, I love you. I love talking to you because you're so smart. I'm like a sponge. I just eat it all up. I really love it. I just want to know more and more and more. And I think the public wants to too. And it's the truth. It's really great story. So I don't really like the fact that people look upon you and I as we're some kind of criminals just because we're gun owners.
Yeah. Well, I don't like it either, but I'll put it out there immediately. I'll tell people in the course of a conversation, I'll throw the word gun in, or I'll say I'm a dealer. Then they ask a dealer of what, and I tell them. And if they don't like it, well, I try to convert them. And sometimes I'll have to just walk away and say that's somebody in life that I can't be friends with. Or maybe I can be friends with, but, you know, I'm pretty easygoing normally. Unless actually, I'm pretty easygoing. There's no button anybody can push. My family can push the buttons. Nobody else can. So.
Okay, so we're coming down to the bottom of the show. I do want you to. I know you had a lot of stuff to say, and I want you to, definitely give us like your last word or your summary. We could spend a few minutes talking about some of the research you've done the past couple of days for the show. So let's do it.
Well. The research for me goes back quite a bit because, as I've told you in other times, I've done quite a bit of writing on genocide and 2A and for NRA magazine with several other authors. And if anybody wants, they can go up to AmmoLand and Google my name. They'll see loads of pieces that are written by myself and some other authors together. So the research has always been done, all going back to the late 1980s. I've been doing this, and when people talk about, well, gee, the CDC is not allowed to do gun research. No, that's not true, and here's why. Because I've been there in the 1990s when they told the CDC that they couldn't do certain things. Yes, they could do gun research. It just can't be biased. So I've just been around. And like you, I'm a sponge. Goes in. I read, I listen, and I just soak it all up. And under the right circumstance, I can make it come out in a pen, or I can make it come out of my mouth. And that's about it. But I've been doing this a long, long time with several other authors. I've had the opportunity to teach a young lady from Africa to shoot an AK-47 in under a half an hour. And if she would have been able to do that, her village probably would have survived. The trick is could people learn to shoot this thing safely and hit a target? And we did it. We gave her safety. We showed her how to load it. We showed her how to load a magazine. We showed her how to shoot. And within a half an hour, we had her putting bullseyes at 100 yards into about a 3-inch circle. So would she have protected her village? Yes. And if there would have been 2 of them, because most people, once they meet an armed resistance, they back away. Even armies do. They think twice. They don't want to die either.
Right.
So my research goes through the years. A lot of John Lott reading, following his statistics and how he puts his statistics together.
Hey, did you know that I know John Lott is a friend of mine as well, and did you know that when he first started, because he's an economist, PhD in economics, and when he started doing the research on gun control and gun issues, he came from the perspective that he's going to find that guns are dangerous.
That is right.
And so then he starts conducting his research, and he realizes that the other side is actually right on the issues and on the facts. In fact, his last book, More Crimes, no, More Gun Laws. More guns, less crime. Yes, and it's an excellent book, and it really breaks down the numbers. And it really, he's an expert economist, and he breaks down the numbers, and basically what's in black and white, what we can read, we can see it, is that more gun laws, in places where there's gun laws, there's more crime. In places where there's less gun control, there's less crime. And there's a pattern of this. What he's also been able to find out, Dr. Lott, is that he's taken a look at some of the studies that were done by, for instance, Mayors Against Guns, Mayor Bloomberg's group. And he's been able to go back and take a look at their study. And he's picked out all the areas where they did it wrong. Well,
his beautiful part is he takes he asks for their raw data.
Yes, it does.
And then he goes through and he says, well, you added in this, first of all, for instance, you're saying youth violence. Well, youth violence is different than just youth shootings, because violence adds in gang violence. But that should be a separate number, because that is a unique thing over turf. We're fighting over turf.
Right.
Okay? And that doesn't belong here. Suicides is another one. Yeah, you want to put suicides in a category, put them in, but discuss that it is separate from this whole number.
Correct.
Okay? And he does that, and he does it beautifully.
Yeah, so, he does. Very good. Very good researcher. Yeah, he's really incredible, Doctor. I'm going to have him. I'm going to get him on my show soon.
The only thing I would like to leave you with,
yes,
we gun owners, we 2A people are not the problem. Okay? Super moral cowards, the left among us, the left, quote unquote, among us, they just don't understand or refuse to understand. And we refuse to follow their percepts, because we do not wish to end up like the Moriari. We are not going to surrender. As a Jew, I will never step into that railroad car without a fight.
Oh yeah, baby. It's the right way to be. I agree with you 100%. And that's very, very important, what you just said, Alan. Because don't forget that Hitler disarmed the Jews.
That's right.
He had to. Because it's a natural defense to defend yourself. And it was only, well, I won't say only, but it was part of the reason why he was able to put get the boxcars, because you all were unarmed. Terrible, terrible situation you want to be. You're a sitting duck for a despotic government, and if we want to remain free, there's no way in hell that this can happen to America. We cannot be disbarred, because you can just kiss freedom goodbye. It's gone. It's gone.
We must not yield on that at all. Okay?
All righty. So thank you so much. I think it's been a great show and very informative. And I'll definitely have you back on in a couple of months or something to give us an update.
Sounds good.
All right.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alan. Bye.